Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to the course of Logistics Management, LSM. It's coded LSM 730, and my name is Dr. Khurram Shehzad Mughal. Before we move on, let me introduce myself. I did my MBA in Finance and Investment quite some time ago, very long time, because if I tell you the exact time, you would know my age. So after that, I worked in a public sector. I did my MBA from NUST, and then I worked in a public sector organization for like around 10 years. And then I did my PhD in economics from Austria, Johannes Kepler University, Linz, Austria. And after that, I came back to Pakistan and I joined universities I have been associated to academia ever since 2010 around, that time. First I was in Tikra University, then currently I'm at ComSats. With that extensive, like so many years of teaching and research work and working in different fields, like working in the areas of logistics or trade and all those associated topics related to economics somehow one way or the other, I have found out that certain aspects of like, for example, aspects like globalization have had a very major impact on lives of all the businesses around the world, and in fact all the economies. Going global is one of, you can say, the prime objective of so many international organizations, international institutions who ensure that countries open up their borders for trade, countries open up their border for financial freedom. That leads to financial liberalization, trade liberalization. So economic integration is one of the aspects that has resulted from globalization. Now, because of that, certain areas and certain aspects of business, certain entities or certain departments of business entities have gained utmost importance. For example, in the perspective of human resource, the latest research issues with the expansion of multinational organizations going global, like for example, in the aspect of human resource, the main concern is multicultural human resource management, multicultural conflict resolution and stuff like that. And so goes for the aspect of marketing, because it is whenever you market a product, you need to consider certain, you can say, cultural aspects of a country. When organizations like Pepsi company or Coca-Cola or Nestle or Procter & Gamble, they expand, they have to consider cultural aspects of all the countries, of all the regions, of all the religions, of all societies, of all the continents. Now, similarly with human resource marketing, with for example, areas like development of multinational financial management, so has the aspect of logistics management grown over time. What is logistics management as such? Don't worry about it, because we would go into the course deeply. We would look into different aspects, and I would take you to the exact definitions, that this is the scope of this course and this is the scope in which we are covering this subject as such. But it is, when it comes to the layman's mind, it is, people consider that it is just basically transportation of goods and items from one point to other point. That is true at certain level, but then the subject of logistics management or the area of supply chain management goes beyond that. There are so many things that we seem to ignore or we seem to overlook when we talk about logistics, because all we consider is that we need to transport, physically move the location of raw material to the production facility, from that to for example, when the production process makes the finished good, then that to the customer, and the job of logistics managers is like done. But that's not the case, because there are flows of information as well that needs to be considered in this area. There are so many issues about the relationship between supply and demand, the forecasting, inventory management, which are covered in this course. or specifically in this area. Now the logistics manager or logistician has to consider so many multi-dimensional aspects while running or overlooking that business, or for the smooth functioning of that business. And with the expansion that I was mentioning earlier, with globalization, with business entities expanding all over the globe, it has gained more importance over time. Now, this course would basically cover these broader areas. First, we would cover the introduction of this course, because why introduction is important and why logistics management is important. As we would come and see later on, that logistics actually make up one of a major portion of the cost of the total product being supplied to the customer, from the stage of the raw material to the point to the end user. There are various types of costs that are incurred. For example, marketing costs, for example, human resource costs, for example, other financial purchasing and acquiring cost, acquiring of material, processing, all that stuff, salaries of acquiring resources, raw material, labor, capital, all that. But then the process of delivering those products, the process of storing those products, the process of keeping track of the various quantities required, various quantities supplied, is also a major cost in the total process. You see, so we need to define what is logistics management or supply chain management, what is the scope of this subject, what we are going to cover, and how we are going to cover it. This would be discussed in introduction part of this course. Then comes the strategy and planning. With the growing need of the customers, as we would, again, as I say, that we would discuss this later on, with the growing needs of the customer, with the growing demands of the customer, with closer ties between different nations, with closer associations and dependability of business entities on other business entities, their contractors, their suppliers, their subcontractors, as well as their dependency on the government, as well as their dependency on the cross-border, you can say, governments of neighboring countries and all that. It is very important to plan and strategize and use supply chain or logistics in your favor against your competitor, or to gain competitive edge over your competitor. And similarly, to plan all the activities so that the product is at the place where it is needed at the time when it is needed. That is the most important aspect. That is the sole purpose of existence of a business. You must consider that whenever a customer pays a price for a product, for example, if I buy a cold drink for 35 or 40 or 45 rupees in Pakistan, you must understand that bottle of Coke has been exchanged through so many hands just to reach to me on that day when I needed it, and at that time when I needed it. That is the most important aspect. Now, if I can't find that means there is a failure in between somehow. So, for that product to reach to the customer at the right time and at the right point and at the right price, another aspect of it, supply chain management or logistics management plays a very pivotal role in that. So let us consider that when I pay that price, for example, let's 45 rupees for a bottle of Coke or 50 rupees, I value that product more than the price, or at least equal to the price that I'm paying. Now, that value that I assign to that product is actually more than the cost of that product. Only that is the way that the business entity can earn a profit. Now, if the business entity can earn a profit on that product through, you can say, by me valuing that product that much, that would automatically mean that there are mechanisms behind that, including marketing, human resource, and supply chain, logistics, all those aspects which have somehow ensured that that product, the cost on that product is not more than the price of that product that I am willing to pay. You see, so it is a very complex relationship which is a very important aspect for success to any business entity. Moving on, then another important aspect is that we are going to cover is the product. Because the whole supply chain process, the whole marketing aspect, the business entity's existence depends on the product that they are supplying. There are various types of product. There are so many thousands and millions and gazillions of different products being supplied. Just do not consider the products that you buy off the shelf. Those things that are supplied as raw material are also products for those people who supply that raw material, who supply, who ensure the timely delivery to other companies. I am talking about intermediate goods. For example, if cement is being packaged and produced and being supplied to a construction site, the supply chain manager, for the supply chain manager of that cement industry is concerned with that product. Its handling, its delivery, its inventory management would have different aspects. There are similarities between different companies' supply chain and logistics processes, but there are differences also. Then for those companies who crush, you can say, who extract the raw material for making cement and supply that raw material to the cement industry, for the logistics manager of that company, that raw material is the product. They need to ensure its timely supply, timely delivery at the right price and at the right time and at the right moment to cement industry. For that logistics management, that raw material is the product. So then further, for military services, the product is different. For services industry, the products are different. For a bank, the product might be different because they are providing a service. For a hotel, the product, for a hotel and a restaurant, for example, Marriott or Serena, the products are different. For McDonald's and KFC, the products are different. All those products have their own specific handling and managing techniques. They cannot be, you cannot use one, you can say, format to manage all of them. So their timely delivery and their logistics issues are different, somehow similar, but then also different from others. Then it is another important aspect that we are going to explore in this course is locations strategy. Location is of very important aspect. We would discuss that in detail later on, but let me give you a glimpse. Broadly, there are two types of production processes. There are, for example, weight gaining production processes and there are weight losing production processes. If we consider a closed economy, that would be more simpler to understand, because with expanding economies, for example, if a television is being assembled in China, it is possible that so many parts are arriving from different countries to exact that location at the exact time. You see, so location is also very important. Then coming back to my initial point that I was explaining, there are weight gaining production processes and there are weight losing production processes. When you assemble a television, you combine different parts to make a television set. That television set gains weight as it becomes a product. You see, it is comprised of smaller parts that are assembled together to make a big television set. Now, the question is that where should it be located? Should it be assembled very far away from the end user, or should it be located close by to the end user? Because the transportation cost of that television set would change with that. Because if you assemble a television set, for example, in a very far-flung region, and then you have to ensure its delivery to some other place which is very far away, because it has gained weight now, it would cost more to deliver it over there. Then there are weight losing production processes. For example, let's consider again the gravel that is used, or cement or something like that, in which case the raw material source is near mountains or those extraction sites. So the production process, the production facility is not made away, is not established or located very far away from those sites, because it is a weight losing production process. The big rocky material that is extracted from the mountains is very heavy to move, very heavy to transport. The raw material is heavy in this example. In the other example, in television example, the raw material was lighter, but the finished product was heavier. In this case, the raw material is heavier comparatively to the finished product. When you extract some big piece of rock from a mountain, and then you need to process that to make some either gravel or something, it would be very expensive to transport that raw material away to a production facility which is located near the customer. So the location strategy completely changes. Now you install the plant near that extraction site. With the plant near that extraction site, you process that product, you reduce its weight, and then you transfer, either you move either the cement or for example gravel or anything like that. A weight losing production process. So it is in supply chain management, location strategy is also very important aspect, and this is not just the case in case of for example, you can say the production facility location. What I was just discussing was a production facility location. In that aspect, I just remembered an example. Have you ever noticed that, for example, all the furnaces that make bricks are always located near the cities, not inside the cities because they cause pollution, but just next to the cities, because again they gain weight while being produced. Before, it is just you can say soil, and then they are converted into bricks. After they are made into bricks, that product is heavier. It is better to locate that facility near to the place where those bricks are needed. This was another example of weight gaining production process which just came to my mind, so I thought I should mention. Now, going on, it is not just the production facility that we need to consider. It is also, or as well, it is you can say the warehousing, and because to ensure timely supply of the product to different networks, across a different network, to different cities, for example. You cannot establish production facility in all the cities where the product is needed, near all the customers who would demand the product. But you need to have a central location. There are some statistical techniques to ensure that also, to ensure the plant or facility location, and to identify a suitable, for example, warehousing facility, where you would establish a central hub where you would provide all the product and store it over there for some time, and then you would establish its distribution across different regions. Many companies have, for example, warehousing facilities across many regions, and through those warehousing facilities, through those hubs, they cover certain areas of supply of that product to meet the customer's demand, to ensure that the product is over there at the price that they are willing to pay at the time when they need that product. So location strategy is also very important. Then for example, the fifth aspect that we are going to discuss is transport decisions, because they also contribute a lot towards the supply chain process and to the cost of providing services or the product to the customer. For example, there are many ways of transportation. It can be through air freight, it can be through, for example, big ships, it can be through road transportation. Now, these are different choices that every business entity might have, but which one would be the most optimal one? Now, do not consider this logistics management only narrowed down to the delivery of the product. Remember that, because it, as we would discuss later on, it would also be related to somehow forecasting of the demand. It would also be related to for example, flow of information. It would also be related to and directly associated to reverse logistics, because then there are, for example, there is a faulty product that on which there is a warranty claim. It flows back to the original vendor. So transport decisions are very important, and transport decisions again are somehow directly associated to the level of customer satisfaction that you are targeting. Because, for example, if you need to satisfy, if you have set your standards very high, your delivery time needs to be very short. Your service provision needs to be in a well-defined time period. For example, Domino's Pizza cannot say that 30 minutes are free. That is a very, very significant logo that has its own implications, and there is a whole supply chain process behind it. There is a whole mechanism working to ensure that 30 minutes or less should be ensured. Otherwise, you would have to deliver the product at your own cost. So they need to ensure that. So they need to have, they need to decide, that is the customer satisfaction level that they have decided. If they have decided on that level, that would mean that all these decisions, from strategy and planning to the product itself, to the location strategy, and to the transport decision, and to the inventory strategy that is coming up next, all these decisions have to be in line with that 30 minutes or less motto or a statement or a policy. You see, so transport decisions are also very important. In certain cases, when you set your standards high, you need to provide, for example, you need to manage the flow of customer feedback well in time. You need to ensure that your customers are not dissatisfied with your service response. In case of you need to follow up all the whatever you have done. That whole process is a supply chain process. Now you need to ensure the timely delivery, because if you say that I'm going to deliver that product in 5 or 7 days, then you need to make sure that that product is over there in 5 or 7 days. When we purchase a book or any other item on Amazon, on eBay, from a vendor in UK or USA, they give us 7 to 14 days. When they give us 7 to 14 days, they target that time, and the whole supply chain process comes into a cycle to ensure that that product is in my hands at the time when I need it, because I have given them 7 to 14 days. So it should be within that bracket. Another important aspect that needs to be ensured, and all these decisions, the transport decisions as well, along with all the points that I'm going to discuss and all the points that I have discussed, ensure that timely delivery. Then there is inventory strategy. We would discuss that in detail, but there are so many strategies along which inventories can be managed. Inventories are there to ensure the gap, to bridge the gap between supply and demand. Because we always ensure, in case of for example, in case of any business enterprise, its management needs to ensure that its product is available for the customer whenever the customer needs it. Because if, for example, I go to a shop to buy, for example, a spray for a mosquito repellent, right? Now, there are, for example, let's name 2-3 brands. There is Mortein, there is Finish, there is Baygon, and all those. I'm targeting Mortein. I need that spray. I go to a shop, but Mortein is not on the shelf. What would I do? I would buy some other brand. Now, that process might stop over there, but that process might continue. Let's assume I go to a shop, I buy, I cannot find Mortein, I pick up something else. If I pick up something else, there is a slight chance, there is a certain level of probability that I might consider at that given moment that Finish, for example, if I buy Finish is the product that is readily available as compared to Mortein. So that would automatically create a bias inside me. And secondly, then there is a possibility that if I go for product A and I cannot find it and I buy product B, that would automatically, there might be a probability that I might like product B in replacement of product A, and I might substitute permanently. Because customer loyalty is dependent on how much that product satisfies me. So that is another important aspect. So I was associating this to inventory strategy, because it is very important for firms to ensure that that product is available to the customer when the customer needs it. That is the aim of whole supply chain or logistics process. Now, if that product is not at the point where it is needed, then that would automatically mean that customer might switch. And to avoid that switching, firms need to ensure that their inventory strategy is efficient. It can be a just-in-time inventory strategy, it can be a pull strategy, it can be a push strategy. We would discuss those when we would go into greater detail, or we would slightly touch this in this introduction course and this introductory lecture, by the way. So the point is that inventory strategy is one of another very important aspects of this whole supply chain process. Then the storage and handling system, again going back to that product aspect, storage and handling is another very important aspect, because there are different types of products. There are perishable products, there are those products that can be stored. There are those products which do not have an expiry date on that. For example, your system in which you are watching this video, your this camera which is recording me right now, these screens that are behind me right now, they do not have an expiry date on them. If you put them in a place and you handle them with care, they would be there for a long time without being used. In fact, actually that's what I'm saying, storing it. So, but then if you are drinking something or eating something, it cannot be, for example, stored for a very long time. They are perishable items. But then you move on. For example, if you go towards fisheries, they need to be stored under certain environment. When the fishermen take out fish from the sea or from a river, they store it in colder places, and that's how they are transported. And even in that sense, because that storage is a cost itself, keeping them in chillers, keeping them at low temperatures is a cost itself. So that is another important aspect of you can say the supply chain process or logistics management process. Now another thing is that handling system. Handling system is that there are products that are fragile, there are products that are not that very fragile, because it is different to transport a McDonald's burger or its packaging or its buns and its raw material to for example McDonald's chain in which I'm going to buy or you are going to buy that product. And then there is a difference when you transport a car and its parts for them to be assembled in Pakistan, and when they are assembled in a certain facility, that car is being transported to some other location for being sold. You see? So the point is that handling system is very different, and they are different for different entities. There are again similarities in all those systems, certain important aspects which we would discuss again, and there are differences, major differences in them also. Then the storage and handling decisions will incorporate, the system is established, decisions is related to when you execute that system, when you take decisions whether that thing is to be stored for how much time period, what type of cost is to be incurred, whether we have to do it ourselves, whether we have to subcontract it, which mechanism would reduce our cost. So many aspects like this which need to be considered in this whole logistics management process. This list that you are looking at in your screens right now is what we are going to cover in this course. These are the course contents. This is the overview of supply chain management or of logistics management. We would later on, when we move towards introduction, we would clarify these terms also. That is another important aspect of this course. I hope you understand what we are going to cover. First, we are going to have an introduction. Then we are going to discuss the strategy and planning, that how supply chain decisions are of strategic importance to a business entity and how they plan those activities. Then the product itself, because the supply chain process, the logistics process needs to be customized with the different types of products, because product can be a physical good that we can touch, and a service that we use, and behind those services there are so so many things going on. For example, there is a whole network of activities that takes place to provide that product at that given moment to me. And then there is the location strategy, because that is very important, whether they need to, when business entities, when their production plants, for example, need to be located near the customers or near me, so they can have easier access to the customer, or they need to be located near the raw material, because that reduces the cost, because all these efforts, all these discussions turn out, their focus is, they turn out to be the discussions and focus of the cost, because firms need to minimize their costs in order to maximize their profits. So then transport decisions goes for the same, under the same paradigm. Then we would discuss the inventory strategy. Then we would discuss the storage and handling system, the storage and handling decisions. And now, how we would take along with this course, I have recommended a course textbook which I would be following throughout this course. That is Business Logistics Supply Chain Management, 5th edition by Ronald H. Ballou. That is the textbook that we would be focusing on most of the time, or you can say, in fact, all of the time, through various lectures that we are going through. Then there are other recommended textbooks. For example, Logistics and Introduction to Supply Chain by Donald Waters, Introduction to Logistics Systems Management by Gianpaolo Ghiani and Gilbert Laporte and Robert Musmanno. Then there is Supply Chain Management in Theory and Practice by Birgit, Jespersen and Larsen. These are recommended textbooks because if you need to understand a concept in a deeper sense, and either some of these books would be a little basic and one of these book is a little advanced. Now, we would try our level best that we can understand a topic in the course textbook. It is a very good book which explains every topic step by step, and since we would be going through the lectures consisting out of this book, coming out of this book, so it would be very easier for you to go back to this book and explore these topics again if you do not understand anything or if you want to recall anything. Because believe me, whenever you go to a business entity or even if you run your own business, these aspects of logistics management would be in front of you. Whether you are an employee or you are an entrepreneur or you already have your business established, logistics management and supply chain management is one of the very important and significant part of any business. So this book is very good. You can follow that. Other books are also very excellent, but since I would be following that book, it would be useful if you can get that somehow. And then these other books, we would be discussing them. We would need to go to them if it is necessary. You can also go to those books. Then there is miscellaneous material. There is a Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Previously, up till I guess 2005, it was Council of Logistics Management. It was called CLM. And in 2005, it was they revamped its name to with a different image, Council of Supply Chain Management Professions. When we go through this course, the introduction part of this course, you would understand why there is a difference between why the name was changed from Logistics Management to Supply Chain Management Professionals. Because logistics management is some people would debate that logistics management is a part of supply chain process, the whole supply chain process, but some people would also say that it is just supply chain management or supply chain process is another name for logistics management. There are different debates on that, but still. Then there is Journal of Business Logistics, where you can go and explore the latest research works of various authors, because believe you me, it is logistics management is a very important aspect of any business entity. I have repeated that many times and I cannot emphasize it more, because its importance cannot be highlighted. Whatever I do to highlight its importance, my efforts would be less to actually reflect its importance for any manager or for any business entity. people are conducting research. Even this Council of Supply Chain Management, supply chain professionals have their conferences and seminars where people present their research papers, different aspects of business entities, that how they behave, what are the costs, how these costs can be minimized, how the supply chain process can be optimized, how the feedback process can be made efficient, what would reduce the cost, what would increase the cost. There are so many aspects, because with the businesses going global, with globalization, we hear very often that, for example, there was a book where the world is flat, that is associated to globalization again. With globalization and with world becoming a global village, with borders shrinking, and the time is of importance to everyone, the supply chain process has become more and more important with it. We would see its evolution with the evolution of the history itself. We can see that actually. It starts from the service industries to physical products, to military, for example, ventures, and to each and every aspect of any global interaction or any local interaction between two different regions. So there is extensive research on that. This is in the slide you can see the course textbook, the recommended textbooks. All of these books are very important. We will be following the course textbook. I would suggest that you get that book at the earliest. Then there is I have also explained some. I have also listed some at least two miscellaneous sources for which can be a very good source of information for you. Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals and the Journal of Business Logistics. Here is a very good statement. The supply chain is simply another way of saying the whole process of business. Peter Drucker in 1969 said that. And supply chain process is the whole process of business. The supply chain is the whole process of business is a very deep statement. The purpose of any business is to, when we move on into this course, we would see that even the 4 P's or like 7 or 8 P's of marketing, the price, the product, the promotion, the place and the price are somehow linked to supply chain. So in human resource aspect, the whole provision of goods and services to those people who are provision of you can say raw material to those two people who assemble that on the time, again a supply chain aspect. You can see that in every area. With businesses going global, the role of international financial management again becomes very important with the aspect of supply chain management. So that is why this statement that if you take out the supply chain process, if you ignore the supply chain process, the whole process of business goes out with it. So looking at the introduction and the historical perspective, logistics management. Now, since we are going through introduction, we might go through many aspects that I have discussed earlier, because because of this interaction, the medium of interaction that we have, it would be very important that I repeat some certain important aspects of this course so that they are imprinted in your ideologies, in your minds, so that whatever type of final exam or midterm or sessionals or quizzes you go through, those important aspects automatically come to your mind. That is why we would be highlighting those important aspects, and I would be emphasizing them again and again. Again, going back to the introduction, needs in the historical perspective. If we look at the historical perspective, when let's assume, for example, one individual who is alone in any region, going very far back, where would he? Let me ask you, where would he locate himself? Okay, maybe some of you got it right. He would locate himself near the products or the things that he would need. For example, he might locate himself near water sources, he might locate himself near the food sources. In the older times, people would move around whenever their basic needs could not be met from an area. They would move from northern areas they would come down to lower regions where they can find food or to meet their basic needs. Then people started to trade with each other, to exchange with each other. But they could only exchange what could be transported. They could only exchange what could be easily transported from one location to another location. So there is a transition. There is a transition from being dependent on the location aspect. You locate near the things that you need for survival, to a little less dependency, because now you can exchange. If you project this a little further, the lesser dependency on the source from which you get that product, lesser dependency on the water resources, lesser dependency on locating near the food resources, lesser necessity to locate near the shelter resources, the population would expand, and so does the exchange process strengthens. And with the strengthening of exchange process, the supply chain or the logistics process strengthens. In a historical perspective, if we look at, for example, if we consider that there is two main important aspects of supply chain process. There are so many important aspects of supply chain process, but from historical perspectives, two things would be very, very, very important. One is the transportation thing, and the other one is storage thing. If the link between, for example, individual and the product that he needs is weak, if the good cannot be transported to him because it itself is very difficult to transport, so exchange would not take place. And if the good cannot be transported because the good is perishable and it cannot be stored, so in that case the exchange would not take place. So individual would have to locate to a place where they can get those goods and services on their own. That is why I mentioned it on the slide, that locating near where there is production itself, right? So now that would mean with expansion or with improvement in technology, the trade would flourish. And with flourishing of the trade, that would mean now people can locate a little away from the production facilities. And with lack of transportation and storage facilities, people can only enjoy a limited number of goods. People living near, for example, you can say oceans and seas or rivers, their main source of food would be, for example, fishes in older times, of course, or the seafood would be their main source. People living near the forest, for example, or living near, you can say, in places where you can find, they can hunt down animals, they would be located over there, but they would be deprived of other types of goods and services. So without this whole supply chain process, or with weakening of the supply chain process, people would be confined to a limited consumption of goods and services. But with the strengthening of this transportation and storage process, people can enjoy a wider variety of goods and services. It is so easy today to go to a shop and buy any imported product. For example, we can, even in certain shops, there is local Procter and Gamble product on the shelf, local Head and Shoulders, and there is an imported Head and Shoulders. One from Malaysia, one from Thailand, one from some other European country, or for example, one from Middle East. It is so easy to get all those products on one shelf. And I can choose. I can even be a loyal customer for a product being imported from Malaysia. Whenever I go to find a box of tissue, there are different varieties. When I go to a shop to buy a box of cereals, there is a different variety. There is There are products, for example, from Fauji cereals from made in Pakistan. There are those from Nestle made in Pakistan, but then there are also cereals which are not made in Pakistan. They are made something from some other country. But when they are made from some other country, today I can choose to be a loyal customer of that product also, because that product would be there on the shelf whenever I need it and at the price that I need it. So if let me go to that aspect later on about the cost of transportation. But with that transportation and storage technology being improved, now that product is available on the shelf for me to use whenever I need it. So that would mean now I can be a loyal customer to that product. The most important aspect of this whole phenomena that I'm trying to portray towards you, the importance of logistics and the development in the logistics and supply chain process, the improvement in that process. That is the most important aspect that I'm trying to focus over here. That product on the shelf when I need it, so I can be a loyal customer to a product that has been made thousands of miles away, and it would be over there on that shelf whenever I need that and on the time that I need it. Now come to the cost aspect. Let's assume going back to those technological levels, let's regress them, let's turn them a little down. Again, going back to historical perspective. Let's place two products together, two options. We can produce that product at home and we can import that product. With higher transportation costs, with lower technology, the cost would increase. With higher transportation cost and with higher cost of storage facility, that product would be expensive if imported. But with improvement, with decrease in transportation cost, and when that product would be expensive as compared to the local product, we would prefer to choose the local product because that gives us the value that we consider it would give. That we would be able to give the price or pay the money equal to the amount how much we value that product. And they would only charge the price as long as that price is higher than the cost, because there is a profit margin also. So with increase in the transportation cost, with increase in the storage prices of storage facility, or with increase in the cost of whole logistics and supply chain process, when that product comes from a far-flung area, it would be expensive. I would never buy that product. I cannot afford that product because I do not value that product in much in terms of monetary value that I have to pay. That product does not give me the level of utility for which I am going to spend that money, right? So in that aspect, with improvement, only with the improvement in the supply chain process, with only in the improvement of logistics process or integrated business logistics management process, the costs would reduce, and only then the trade would take place. And only in that scenario, the firms would be able to specialize in the goods and services that they are good at producing. And only in that aspect, the theory of comparative advantage would come into play. I hope you have heard of comparative advantage. By definition, comparative advantage is that countries or regions, basically countries, economies specialize in production of those goods and services for which they have the lowest opportunity cost. If they have two choices, for example, they can produce either wheat or they can produce computers. They would produce that product in which they have the lower opportunity cost of producing. So that would mean that if, for example, Pakistan has a comparative advantage in, let's say, textile industry, maybe due to availability of raw material, used to have comparative advantage in textile industry. Let's go back a little bit when we had textile comparative advantage in that. So let's assume currently we have comparative advantage in textile industry. That would mean that we export in a too good environment. We would produce textile. There is clothing and there is food. There are two goods in the whole world, and there are two countries. So we would produce, country A as Pakistan as home country would produce clothing, and we would produce it in excess. Then we exchange that excess clothing for the food from the neighboring country. You see? So we specialize in those goods and services in which we have lower opportunity cost of producing. We can produce it in a much better way. But then this exchange can only take place with a stronger supply chain process. If the cost of supplying or sending the textile to our neighboring country is low enough so that when we produce it and we provide it to the customer in the next country, and on the other hand, if they try to produce it themselves, the prices of our product would be lower than the prices of their product. Only then this can take place, and the prices of our product can be lower as compared to if they produce it domestically, only if supply chain process is efficient. Without that, it is not possible. Otherwise, every country would produce what they want to produce. So today, we consume goods from Malaysia, from China, from India, from USA, from UK, from all across the globe. Because those countries are able to produce those products at a much cheaper cost of production and then supply those products across thousands of miles to Pakistan, to shelves in our stores, because that whole process has a lesser cost than the cost that we would incur on producing those goods and services at the quality that they are providing those goods and services. Their costs are still lower despite that whole transportation channel, whole supply chain process. So, and further, with this technological change, with this improvement in storage and transportation technology and facility and reduction in their cost and they being more efficient, the principle of comparative advantage comes into play. Without that, even the comparative advantage principle cannot ensure that. So that gives you, or maybe that would give you a slight idea that supply chain process or logistics management process is of utmost importance to the existence of whole business. And this is what the statement of Peter that we showed you in the start, that I showed you in the start, that logistics or supply chain process is actually talking about the whole process of the business. Because with firms going global, with all those products with us, with all of this scenario that I have built up till now, supply chain and logistics management is as old as the trade itself. Now, during this discussion, I have expressed multiple aspects of supply chain. There is forecasting of demand, there is identifying the customer's need, then forecasting the demand, then producing that product. Then in fact, while producing that product, there is another whole supply chain process in which we need to ensure the delivery of that product, the raw material to produce that product, defining the location of that facility, ensuring the timely supply of that product to the end user through so many warehouses or to very far away locations, with countries going global, with countries entering into trade agreements, like countries forming European unions or North Atlantic free trade agreements, or all those agreements that different countries have with each other. The importance of supply chain process has been magnified. With, for example, a business manager of Dell Computers would be, or logistics manager of Dell Computer would have to do a more complicated job than somebody who's involved in, for example, picking up wheat from some region in interior Punjab to providing it to, for example, KPK or Sindh. You see, so he is global, but then he is national, but then below that there is also a supply chain process for some vendor who produces a product in a city and then sells it outside in the market. the complexity magnifies with the size of the business entity, with the expansion of the business entity, with the expansion of the trade. So supply chain management is as old as trade, and supply chain management can be seen either managing all those areas individually. You can deal with the supplier individually. The supplier can deal with his supplier or subcontractor individually. You can deal with your customer individually. Then your customer can deal with their customer individually. You can coordinate your marketing on one hand while keeping the production away from it, or managing the logistics away from it. Finance and HR separately. You can look at them as separate, smaller entities. But with the latest trends, it is very difficult to keep them separate from each other, because the efficiency would go down. You have to see it as a whole coordinated activity. The whole coordinated activity to provide the product to the customer when the customer needs it, where the customer needs it, and at the price the customer wants to get it. Such a whole cumbersome process. So they can be historically these aspects of supply chain and logistics were looked at individually. They were dealt with individually. But in the latest trends, they are coordinated activities. For example, a car company, an assembly line would that part that is to be assembled in the whole assembly process would be over there when it is needed, not before that, because they won't like to afford the cost of storage. In order to minimize that cost, they would make sure that they do not have to store it for a long time. When they need it, it should be there. To ensure that, they should be in touch with their supplier, because now they are their customers. Now to ensure that their suppliers provide them with that product, or the raw material for producing that product, which he has to provide you as a part of your product, that is a whole coordinated activity. You cannot look at it at managing them at individual levels. This is a glimpse of you can say a single firm's, a very narrow view in certain aspects, but not as such a narrow view, but with so many things that are inherent in all those things that are being displayed over here. There is, for example, the process starts from vendors or plants or ports. The raw material is transported to the warehousing. Then from that warehouses, the raw material is transported to a factory. And from that, the factory produces the product, they again transport it to warehouse. That warehouse again transports the product to the facility. So there is inventory management inside it, there is scheduling, there is the whole strategy, there is product handling, product packaging. All those things are inherent inside it, which are not that obvious right now from this image, but we have already discussed them. Then another important aspect is flow of information from customer back to the factory, or back to the vendor and the plant, back to the source of the raw material as such, you can say. Because that information and product going forward, and then information coming back, is important for the whole supply chain process to be successful. Now, that info plus there is reverse logistic aspect also, which we would discuss again. For example, a product is faulty at the customer's end, it might flow back to the factory, and then again it might be repaired, it might be thrown as scrap, or it might be for example given to a secondary market after repairs. That also is another aspect of the supply chain management, because handling the product, and then after the use of that product or after the expiry of that product, handling that process also. Can you imagine that whenever we go to buy a product with an expiry date on it, for example butter or bread, we see dawn bread on the shelves of every store these days. When we look at it, do you see that that product has an expiry date on it? And so exact quantity that is required by the customers at that moment is to be provided, not more than that, because if it is too much more, the expired product would come back that logistics management process or the supply chain process. It would come back through that logistics chain if it is an excess, and that would be a scrap. And if it is provided too less, then again the same risk that I discussed earlier, that your customers might switch to other products, and there is always a risk that they might change to that product altogether, considering that that other product is available, number one, and might be the case that the other product is better than your product. So this is a flow which is very simply narrated in that screen, with so many complicated activities regarding the inventory, regarding the product handling and storage decisions and network planning and the product itself, and the whole strategy of the supply chain. We would discuss a success story also based on the success of a business associated or with their success can be linked directly to the improvements in the supply chain process that they had. Now this takes us to the end of our lecture for today. I'm grateful that you have been bearing me for such a long time, and looking at this, I hope I have established or developed your interest towards the importance of the whole supply chain, importance of logistics management as a subject, and as a practical thing, as well as logistics management, supply chain management as a subject, or as well as the practical aspect of any business entity. And I hope we would continue this in such a, I guess the pace is also very convenient for all of us. So hope to see you next time in this course. Take care. Allah Hafiz.